and this has been going on now for 7 years. Theresa May's been burying her head in the sand. She's been a senior member of this government and the Prime Minister for 7 years. This cannot continue. The government have to change course, get a grip, and put the NHS on a long-term, sustainable financial footing. Give it the money it needs. This cannot carry on.
Well, the government would say that money for the NHS has been going up year on year. Others would argue that actually more money isn't the solution, that the NHS needs to reorganise. Perhaps there needs to be greater privatisation of some elements of it to allow it to react to market forces. Why are you so confident that simply throwing more and more money at the NHS is actually going to improve the service that it provides?
Well, you don't have to take my word for it. You can take Simon Stevens' word for it. He's the head of the NHS, and he called for an extra $4 billion.
To be fair, the head of any organisation will always ask for more money, won't they? Sorry, to be fair, John Ashbridge, the head of any organisation would always want more money for his organisation.
Well, you'd have thought that the head of an organisation has a reasonable sense of how much money the organisation needs, and he called for an extra $4 billion. Of course, we didn't get an extra $4 billion in the budget, and he's warned that things like routine operations for things like knee replacements and hip replacements, people are going to have to wait longer and longer, often in agony, in pain and in distress for those types of operations because the NHS isn't getting the funding it needs. You ask, does the NHS need more privatisation? Most certainly not. We need to end the privatisation in the NHS. We've got a crazy situation where Virgin can sue the NHS for not getting a contract, and where money that should be going to patient care in Surrey is going to Virgin. So, no, we're going to end privatisation. But actually, the big issue is the underfunding, and this sustained underfunding is hitting capacity in the NHS, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing today.
But do you accept that more money has gone into the NHS in recent years and that it doesn't seem to be helping the situation?
Well, the NHS budget has, of course, increased, but it hasn't increased by nearly enough. Traditionally, the NHS budget would rise by around 4% a year. It's been more or less getting 1% a year, so it's not keeping pace with the demands that are placed upon it. And at the same time, the community health budgets, the public health budgets, which are now administered by local authorities, have been cut back. And of course, social care has been cut back by a considerable number of billions, which is really causing problems for the NHS because, as I say, we've got many elderly and vulnerable people trapped in hospital with nowhere to go in the community because the social care support simply isn't there anymore.
But there isn't an endless pot, is there? And the money has to be found somewhere.
No, absolutely, the money does have to be found somewhere, which is why we were very sceptical about cutting billions from corporation tax, or giving £1 billion away in inheritance tax, or perhaps giving £1 billion to the DUP in return for their votes in the Commons voting lobbies. So when the government needs to find money for their own projects, they seem to be able to do it. They just don't seem to be able to find sufficient funding for the NHS.